NBC Sports on Peacock, which starts every day with this man's show. It also ends with PFT PM. Mike Florio back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Mike?
Rich, I'm doing great, pal. How are you today?
What's the story of Week 14? What's the story of Week 14 so far?
I think the story of Week 14 is we had a Week 14.
I know that, right?
Let's not bury the lead.
Right, I know.
Think if we would have known in August how dire the numbers would be, and I know that some people don't want us to talk about that, too bad. If we had known how bad the numbers were going to be in mid-December, we'd have said, there's no way they get the football season, and there's no way they don't miss game. There's no way they don't have to postpone or cancel or work major surgery on the schedule to try to get in enough games to justify a postseason run. There's no way. So it really is amazing, and it speaks more to determination than anything else that the NFL decided doesn't matter who's out, doesn't matter how many guys are down, we're going to play football. It's next man up. It's always been next man up, and that's what we're going to do. But for a couple of times where we got a little nervous about where things were going, Tennessee and Baltimore, it's worked. And it's amazing that it's worked because when you look at the broader context of what we're dealing with as a society, it shouldn't be working, but it is.
So, yeah, again, it was all teams back from their bye. And so it was the busiest Sunday we've seen since Week 3, which was before the bye, and no one else had anything off, and there were no cancellations or delays yet. As we know, the Week 4 game between Tennessee and Pittsburgh was the first one that had to be maneuvered around. So there was a whole host of games yesterday, and Jalen Hurts doing what he did. Are we going to hear that it's his gig the rest of the season, and then that's the end of that? I mean, because it was definitely a much better, not just the result wins, but everything else, Mike.
Yeah, how can it not be his job the rest of the way? Last week, Jason Kelsey, the Eagles' longtime center, had some very frank and raw comments about how the failure of the offense is a total team production. The players, the coaches, everyone. That it's not just Carson Wentz. Everybody stinks. So when you change out one position and all of a sudden you have your signature win, you beat the Saints, who had every reason to keep winning because they were holding on to the number 1 seed by a very slender margin, and now they're not. That's impressive. And so whatever it was you did yesterday, you keep doing. I'm stunned that Doug Peterson wouldn't come out and state the obvious. Of course it's Jalen Hurts. How could you go back to Carson Wentz at this point? And the question is, how far can Jalen Hurts take them, and how clear will it become by the end of the season that come 2021, there's no competition, there's no presumption it's going to be Wentz, it's going to be Hurts, and they're going to spend the full offseason trying to build an offense around the guy that has shown he can come in and save a lost season.
And I got Jim Irsay coming up in hour 2, Mike, and the reason why I bring that up is everybody basically assumes, well, Phillip Rivers is, going to need toe surgery. He's already got his high school coaching gig all set up, that he's going to be done there, and that's a perfect spot to send Carson Wentz. Send him there. Frank Reich might have been the real guru on that sideline for Wentz. Do you think it's as simple to connect those dots, Mike?
Well, I think it is. And here's the reality. Step number 1 for the Eagles, and this is a general rule for any effort by any sports team to trade a player. Step 1, insist you're not trading the player. That's how you get the best possible leverage. Otherwise, yes, maybe you have to pay some of his salary like the Dolphins did to unload Ryan Tannehill onto the Titans. Maybe you've got to send a second-round draft pick like the Texans did to get rid of Brock Osweiler's contract several years ago. So you have to create the impression you're sticking with the guy, you still believe in the guy, you're not going to trade him, and then you hope that someone believes it. I don't think anyone will. Their best hope is to get 2 teams interested, to get the Colts and someone else interested. And the litmus test for me, Rich, is very simple. When Frank Reich, the head coach of the Colts, who was the offensive coordinator of the Eagles in 2017, when Wentz was on track to be the MVP, but for the torn ACL he suffered December 10 of that year, if Reich doesn't want him, that's the ultimate red flag that no one else should. And so we'll see how it plays out, but it makes a ton of sense for Wentz to end up in Indianapolis. If you'd have polled Colts fans back in March and said 1 year, $25 million, who do you want, Rivers or Wentz, it would have been unanimous Wentz. And now, yeah, circumstances have changed, but I think that there's value in this idea that maybe Reich can reset the clock for Wentz. He just needs a fresh start, and maybe if you get out of all of that pressure in Philadelphia, from circumstances, from fans, from everything, maybe he can rediscover himself.
And then just sticking with the Eagles for a second here, just in short term, what Hurts might be able to do. The problem for Philadelphia is the horse could be a little bit too far out of the barn in the NFC East, that they were leading for the first half of the season when everyone else was trying to get their sea legs, because the Washington football team has 6 wins. And, Washington looks amazing on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, just absolutely spectacular. Chase Young, defensive rookie of the year candidate. Jeremy Chin, obviously, doing what he's doing in Carolina. But this kid, Chase Young, is amazing. Alex Smith, however, went down. What can you tell us about Smith, who Washington, one would think, clearly needs, certainly with Seattle coming in for Week 15? What do you have for me?
Well, Ron Rivera, the coach of the Washington football team, said after the game it was a precautionary move to take Alex Smith out, which is surprising because they had created the impression they have no faith whatsoever in Dwayne Haskins. So I'll believe that it was precautionary when I see that, for example, Alex Smith fully participated in practice on Wednesday in advance of next weekend's game. So, look, coaches are cagey and coy about this kind of stuff, and it makes sense. You don't want people to know what you're doing at the quarterback position for as long as you possibly can keep them in the dark. But, you mentioned the Eagles last year, Rich. They were 5-7, and they found the gas pedal, and they ended up winning the division. The problem is they got to jump 2 teams this year,
right?
Not 1. They got to get the Giants and Washington. That tie is either going to save them or kill them. You don't have to worry about tiebreaker when you have a tie. So they're either going to win that division by a half game or potentially lose it by a half game, but it's going to take a ton of work. Steve Kornacki had all the percentages last night, and the Eagles don't have a great shot at this point, and in large part because they need 2 teams to lose down the stretch, not 1.
Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, right here on Peacock, right here on SiriusXM Channel 11, 211, and also later on today, PFT PM to wrap up the day on NBC Sports on Peacock, right here on The Rich Eisen Show. The firing of Paul Guenther in Vegas means both defensive coordinators standing on the sideline when Carr hit Ruggs 8 days ago are now both gone. Where did that come from? And what do you think the Raiders are going to do for the next 3 weeks with this positioning right now, Mike?
When Chris Sims and I were talking about this earlier today, he made a great point. It doesn't happen that abruptly without some sort of an incident, something like what happened with Mark Colombo and Joe Judge, the Giants' former offensive line coach and current head coach, respectively, from last month. But I'm told there was no incident, that it was just a phone call last night to Paul Guenther, that it's done, that it's over. It is kind of confusing. They've beaten some very good teams this year. They held the Browns to 6 points. They've lost mainly to very good teams, except for that blowout in Atlanta where the offense had 6 turnovers, so it's kind of hard to fault the defense. But, could this be just changing the subject a little bit, taking some of the focus off of the fact that the offense isn't getting it done? It feels like something beyond desperation. They had a small chance to make it to the playoffs with Guenther, and now Rod Marinelli comes in with 3 days before the next game, Thursday night game. I think it's unheard of to see this kind of a move made on a short week. You make it on the other side of the short week, right. So you have extra time to get the next guy ready. So this just feels like an impulse move by a coach who maybe doesn't have someone there who can really say to him in a moment like this, don't do it. They can try, but at the end of the day, Gruden's going to do it, and he did it. And now they have to try to make some chicken salad as their playoff hopes melt away.
Who's coaching for their job in the final 3 games of the season, Mike? Because as you know, there's always, I say always, there's frequently the surprise firing. Who do you think is, in fact, coaching for their jobs right now in the NFL?
Well, I think Matt Nagy in Chicago is, and they did well yesterday. And if anything, yesterday's game helped GM Ryan Pace, the guy who picked Mitchell Trubisky over Deshaun Watson, because for one day, for one moment in time, Trubisky was better than Watson, although the truth is the team around Trubisky was better than the team around Watson. I'm not even going to say, hey, if the Jets happen to win the last 3 games, maybe Adam Gase stays, because that team yesterday, they're done. Now, they had to fire Greg Williams to even have a chance of winning one of their final 4 games. I think even with that move, it's not happening. I sense that Anthony Lynn is going to be out with the Chargers. They've decided not to make any moves until after the season. But with that young quarterback in Justin Herbert, that becomes a very attractive job. And frankly, it's not the case, but and I'll link two together, Rich.
Sure.
The Bengals and the Cowboys. Zach Taylor and Mike McCarthy. Both guys, I believe, will be back because both owners, Mike Brown and Jerry Jones, even though they have nothing else in common, the one thing that they are linked by is their staunch refusal to pay someone to not work for them. So until it gets to expiration of contract, or at least expiration of guaranteed money under contract, Zach Taylor and Mike McCarthy are safe, although there's been plenty of rumbling in Dallas about major changes on the defensive side of the ball, which I think will be coming.
Who's your coach of the year, Mike?
Right now it's got to be Kevin Stefanski. 9-3 with a Cleveland Browns team that hasn't been in the playoffs in 18 years, and to come in with no offseason program, no preseason games, a team that grossly underachieved last year, so he had to quickly reverse a negative vibe and bring in a new everything. And it's always judged by how far a coach takes a team beyond whatever the loosely held expectations were. The expectations for the Browns weren't to be 9-3. Maybe to compete potentially for the 7th seed. I mean, they're in the driver's seat now for the 5 seed. They could still win the division. Myles Garrett tweeted about it last week that the Steelers left the door open after they lost to Washington. I'm thinking, no, they didn't. Well, 11-2, 9-3, Browns win tonight. It could be Week 17 NBC primetime for all the marbles in the AFC North between the Steelers and the Browns in Cleveland.
What about Matt LaFleur, though? How come he doesn't get any run? He goes 13-3 in his first year there in Green Bay when everyone's wondering if Aaron Rodgers can be coached to change his spots. And instead, the spot is perfect for LaFleur and Rodgers together. And whatever happened in the offseason with no new receivers and the drafting of Jordan Love, and that narrative is totally fizzled. And the Packers are in first place in the conference, having just clinched the division. Why no run for him? Is it because Aaron Rodgers, we're still assuming you could just still roll the footballs out for him, even though McCarthy disproved that?
I think it's Aaron Rodgers, and I think it's the fact that they were 13-3 last year. And really, he should have arguably been the coach of the year last year, but John Harbaugh with 14-2, and we didn't expect 14-2 from the Ravens. You know, there's a lot of coaches worthy of it, and it's unfortunate that these AP awards are just one vote per voter, and they can't do first place, second place, third place like they do for the Heisman. So you can at least give people some broader recognition, and more names get mentioned, and we can get a better appreciation of who else is out there that deserves it. I mean, Sean Payton deserves it. Andy Reid deserves recognition. Bill Belichick, for crying out loud, because of his failures as a GM, deserves recognition for his performance as a coach. So there are plenty of coaches out there this year who have overachieved, but when you consider all the circumstances of 2020, for Kevin Stefanski to come in, when people were saying, including me, Josh McDaniels should get that job, not Stefanski, what he's done has been remarkable.
Mike, thanks for the time. Greatly appreciate it. And always enjoy you kicking off and ending the day here on Peacock. Thanks for that. And thanks for the call, as always.
All right, Rich. Great talking to you, man.
Right back at you. That is Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. Lots of food for thought. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.